This is the Minding Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Elder Research. Each episode will bring in data and analytics gurus from around the world as they regale us with their data analytics stories and enlighten us with their secrets for how to turn data into actionable insights. Now, here's our host, Evan Wimpy, who will guide us as we dare to mind our own business.
Hello, and welcome to the Minding Your Own Business podcast. I'm your host, Evan Wimpy, and today I'm excited to introduce our guest. And I say this with every show, and I mean it with every show, but sometimes I can mean it a little more than others and be a little more excited. When you heard the intro to the show, you heard the brought to you by Elder Research. I'm introducing our guest, Dr. John Elder, and that name is not a coincidence. He is the founder of what some would call the greatest consultancy of all time, Elder Research. And he has been in this space going on 30 years. He has seen and done and contributed a lot in this space. We are very excited, John, to have you on the show today. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Evan. You didn't have to, really. No.
Yeah, there we go. I'll take the check later. Thanks, John. John, you have been in this space for a while. You've done a lot of really interesting and really cool analytics. You've seen a lot of analytics projects with a lot of different clients, government, commercial clients. You've seen a lot of them be very successful. You've seen, hopefully not as many, but you've seen some that weren't as successful for a lot of different reasons.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk maybe just generally in themes that you've seen, what sort of separates the successful from the not successful projects?
Yeah, great question. We kind of did some data mining on our data mining. And let me list sort of the different little clusters of failures, if you will. Like, first of all, point out that most of our ideas fail. Most of the experiments we try, most of the hypotheses we have, but almost all the projects succeed. So you just you have to have as a data scientist, you have to have a good, hardy attitude, confidence. This is going to work eventually. We're going to keep poking this thing and trying different things until we find something. And it really helps to have teams that are honest in their feedback, where your partner, your colleagues are trying to break what you're doing for the good of everyone, and you don't take it personally. You see it as a wonderful thing if they find a flaw and save you time and help you solve the problem. So I think we successfully have built a culture of that where we're sincerely interested in solving the client's problem and making them happy and successful. And that means kind of checking your ego at the door and working cooperatively together. So sometimes we solve problems that we find out later. On an oil and gas exploration problem, for instance, we found out later that 4 other teams had failed on the problem in earlier years. So we feel like we really are the best at solving really hard problems. But if we look at our failures, there's some which are a few. Right now, we're about 99% successful. We were about 90% successful in our first decade in technically solving the problem, but then only 60% of the projects actually got implemented. So there's kind of a couple levels of success: the technical success, meeting all the objectives, and then do they actually use it or not? Now, the second decade of so we're coming up on our third, so we need to update the stats. But the second decade, that moved to 99% technical success and about 90% implementation success. And I've heard that the industry-wide implementation rate is more like 20% or less. So we feel like we're really, our long experience has helped us do things from the very beginning that help implementation happen. But back to the failures. Don't do anything in the markets. Don't try to predict the stock market. We did have a very successful, very long success with a hedge fund, but most everything else has been very hard. And you think about it, there's thousands of people working very hard every day, and markets are kind of self-correcting. And likewise, don't do horse racing. Don't do other. Even though there's an edge of information we could find, it wasn't great enough to beat the built-in extra costs that the establishments incur. So, and then don't do anything for startups. They want to pay you in pieces of paper that are not recognized at the grocery store, and and they also pivot sometimes pretty radically from making robots to serving Fritos. I don't know. They just sometimes it's pretty crazy. So those and it does help if the client has a budget. So that's kind of a really important thing. Early on, a lot of our projects were gotten from technical contacts. So it would be another technical person saying, "Oh my gosh, you can help me with this technical problem," and then they would have to go solve the problem of finding the budget and calling it whatever and so forth. And we've gotten a lot more success in recent years due to some of my colleagues who are really good at this, at sort of making contacts with more of the C-suite level, more executive level, and getting buy-in for a kind of a makeover of the company into being, data driven and things like that. And that is a more long-term, more sustainable engagement when you have leaders bought into it.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think engaging at the leadership level, does that help drive sort of the implementation success, regardless of technical success, but why you're at that 90%?
Because some of our early projects were forced on a group. A group would be solving a problem but not doing well enough according to their leadership, and then leadership would bring us in as an outsider. You can imagine how well we were initially received by that group.
You're the bad guys.
It takes a while to earn their trust and see that we are there to help them, not to make them look bad and so forth. So that's one issue to think about. Anytime something is leader driven rather than that unit driven. But the advantage of having it being leader driven is they think in terms of budgets and goals and so forth that are on a little bit longer term than a project related group. So if you can win their trust and show them results and be proven reliable, they love going with people they know and trust and have solved for before. So we are once we kind of do the hard work of eventually proving to a client that we can help them, we get a lot of repeat business and have very kind of positive relationships with them. That's good. So fewer clients, but more that shared trust allows you to be much more efficient in getting things done.
Certainly. Yeah, that's great. Do you have across coming on a third decade, that's a lot of projects. Do you have a favorite project that you've worked on?
I was thinking about that because we're moving our offices here in Charlottesville after 15 years in a nice old building. We're moving to the other side of the mall, probably for better parking. I have no idea. It didn't have anything to do with the decision. It's what happens when you delegate everything. But people were kind of giving me a hard time about all these boxes of notes and project files I had, and we're going to have to move them again. And so I've been going through them, and so I actually have been visiting a lot of old projects, and
that's exciting.
That's been kind of fun as I save the highlights. So there is one that comes to mind, and it has a lot of things that make it very typical for us in a positive way and some in a negative way. It was a very successful project. We were asked it was generated by someone who attended one of my courses. I do periodic courses on data science, and they sometimes generate leads or contacts. And she was a head of a group at a pharmaceutical company. A pharmacy and Upjohn had recently merged, and they were testing sort of high volume compound testing had come out, and they had a favorite one from there that they had taken out to A/B tests, double-blind trials both in Europe and the U.S., and they had a bunch of data from that. And they were analyzing it, and it just wasn't good enough. Their best compound wasn't probably good enough to go to market, and to find out if it was good enough or not, they were going to have to spend $1 billion. They had spent $300 million getting to this point, and this was when $1 billion was real money. This was a couple of decades. And they said, we're going to meet with. We can't do it alone. We're going to meet with a larger company in a month. Can you look at the data and see if there's something we missed? It was like, in a month. So it was kind of like, hold the presses. We're gonna work on this. We're gonna do the minimum we need to on all the other projects we're working on, and kind of have a whole of company attack on this. It wasn't a very large group at the time, but we didn't know anything about pharmacology, and they said, well, we can teach you what you need to know quicker than you can teach us data science. And I thought, she just took a course from me. Maybe that's a bit of a dig about my teaching, but anyway, I'll take it. So, long story short, we were very successful. We showed them that by looking at it fresh, changing some things that they hadn't thought of, combining information from distant sources, they had a very clear and powerful and useful drug that was better than placebo, placebo is an amazing opponent. If you put the placebo up against nothing, the placebo is good for everything. Like it's statistically significantly better than nothing. And so to be better than a placebo is actually hard to do. And the pharmaceutical scientists estimate that their existing blockbuster drugs, 70% of the effect was a placebo effect, and only 30% was the drug. So, it's a little scary when you start dealing with medical information because of the things you learn. But anyway, beating the placebo is very hard. Their test that they were doing was based on the way the Food and Drug Administration looks at things. So they were studying for the test. But the question they asked was not an FDA question. It was an internal investment question. Do we do this? And one of the keys it was a psychological problem they were trying to address, and that's not as quantifiable as a lot of other medical problems. And so just a small thing that hadn't occurred to them, and here we are looking at it from the outside. We have experience with a lot of other different areas. We used information from survey analysis to know that people have different set points. So think of a pain scale from 1 to 10. You and somebody else might have a very different idea of what a bee sting is versus smashing your fingers in a door, in terms of what those numbers are. Well, they were just analyzing the numbers of before and after the administration of the placebo or the drug as raw numbers rather than scaling it per person and looking at the delta. And when you did that, that was very helpful. Also, they had 3 different tests, sort of assessments that were accepted in the literature by which they might prove the thing working or not. And they were already cheating a little bit by trying to find, cherry pick which tests that they use to go forward to the agency. But really the tests, although they were very correlated in their results, they actually had different information in them, enough that it was best to use all 3 tests. And so we did a 3D visualization where the scaled tests were on a, -1 is really bad, 1's positive. Everybody starts out 0, 0 in the middle, and then the points all explode outwards as the person's being treated, either in a positive or negative way with some variation based on the test. And then we used kernel density estimation to summarize what the distributions were doing. So we have this sort of bubbles within bubbles. We start out here, the placebo is like a little bit positive, a little bit negative. The drug compound, boom, it's kind of all moving into the positive spot. And so with that one graph and the explanation that went with it, they made a $1 billion decision. For years, we didn't know what that decision was. But 10 years later, someone at a conference grabbed me and said, I got to tell you, it worked. It was one of the 3 drugs that we introduced in that decade. And it's a big success. Thank you so much. So, it was one of these things where we contributed to an area that we knew nothing about. We knew nothing about the specifics, but we know a lot about data. We helped them look at it fresh, just like they wanted. We helped them make a decision that they needed. It was a big success, but we never did any other work in that field, and we never heard about it. So from a business standpoint, it was a really bad, move, one shot miracle and then nothing else come of it. And so that was typical of us as well. We would do projects in all sorts of different areas, very proud of it. And we would learn lots of things in those areas that then sometimes would help us. But from a business standpoint, you really want to start to follow up on your successes and find other similar kind of problems you can solve. And luckily, folks that came and joined us later were much better at that. And otherwise, the business wouldn't have been able to grow.
Yeah, that is a really, really exciting story. And no immediate closure, but at least we're 10 years past now, so you at least know something good came from it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I'm watching. I just finished the first season of the Lincoln Lawyer show last night, and on one of the episodes last night, he was talking about he had represented a lock picker, so somebody who's breaking into a safe, and the sound as that final little thing clicks into place was like, that's what that person lived for. And I know what that's like. When you finally solve that problem, and that's been bedeviling, really smart people for a long time, and you're able to contribute enough to solve it and get that thing to click into place, it's extremely satisfying. It keep you going for a long time.
Yeah, that is very exciting. Sometimes you got to wait 10 years to know if the safe actually opened or not.
To know that they opened the safe. You unlocked it, but what was in it?
Yeah. And unfortunately, they get to keep whatever's in the
They
safe.
keep it all, yeah.
That is a really interesting use case to think about drug discovery and pharmaceuticals. In your time, I think in the last half a year or the last year, large language models have been the front page of not just the AI world, but really just the commercial and the business world. Is there anything that you've seen come about, not necessarily in pharmaceuticals, but just in analytics, where this is really cool? Like this is something that surpassed my expectations. I didn't see this.
Yeah, that's a great example. That and just the generative AI type stuff. When AI was able to win at Go, that was a surprise, and someone summed up my indistinct feelings about it when they knew the research pretty well and the game theory pretty well, and said, "Wow, we're about 4 to 5 years ahead of schedule here." And that's kind of the sense I had too. It's like, whoa, that was a little sooner than I expected, And I think that's the speed of improvements and pace in that arena is a bit jarring and exciting and scary at the same time. But the things that we've always focused on is reliability. So I look at the current ones, and I know they're getting better, but I look at the current ones, and I told somebody they're like a friend that's trying to impress you and throwing out a bunch of facts, half of which are false. And it's like, I don't know really how you could use that, maybe if you're doing ad copy, but if you're trying to, we put a huge premium on the reliability of answers or of information. And so I know they are working on that. And, but it is amazing they can generate from a very small seed, can generate a plausible large flower. So it'll be fun to watch and how that develops.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe the analogy there of can throw out a lot of facts to try to, maybe it's like a dating profile. Maybe it can help you write your dating profile. Yeah. Is there anything?
And about a third of things are not true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nobel Peace Prize winner, Congressional Medal of Honor, got it all. Is there anything that's maybe on the other side of that? Like, I thought we'd have self-driving flying cars by now. Why hasn't AI been able to do this? I thought we'd crack that nut by now.
It's interesting you bring. I don't have that immediate impression, but on the car thing, one of the things that surprised me is that they allowed self-driving cars, legally. Like they did. There's such a litigious society in America where a lot of Europeans joke about. I was in Ireland where they have the Cliffs of Moher, and they basically have a sign that says, if you go too far and fall off, you're stupid. Don't do it. They don't have a fence. But that's not the way the U.S. does. Everything's, you think you're supposed to be in a bubble of safety at all times. So to allow these things out on the road, that kind of astonished me. It was nice from a technical standpoint, but I hope it doesn't prove too dangerous. I think in the long run, it's going to improve safety to have the vehicles running and so forth. But anyway,
certainly
that was a positive. I thought actually that they were being allowing it to be a little bit experimental.
Yeah, that's great. And I really do. I like, John, you mentioned sort of reliability of whatever model output, analytic tool output. And we think like cutting edge, look at the new things that have been developed, and reliability feels like one of the things that's like a stalwart and was important 30 years ago when you were building your first models, and continues to be important today, and presumably will be as long as analytics is a field.
Yeah, I think that knowing the cost, the reliability, the degree of accuracy, and the cost of mistake is so important anytime you address a new problem. Mistakes are almost never equal in cost, a false positive and a false negative and so forth. And so being able to kind of estimate those and use those to help make the best decision is really valuable still.
Yeah,
it's astonishing, though, how often people do percent correct, which just assumes equal weights on all kinds of errors, instead of thinking through the problem.
Yeah, I got my own personal neural network can get a pretty high percent correct on a lot of problems, just guessing baselines. John, a lot of the folks, John, that listen to this show are out there leading analytics teams right now. And I think about your position as a leader in this company here at Elder Research. And then I think about your history as a very strong and creative technical contributor. And I'm curious how you think about your role now and how you've sort of seen that transition. Is it important to stay on top of things technically? Do you have to let go of some things?
Yeah. I tell people, if you have a business, it's just a process of letting go. It's you do it all at first, and then you lead it all. Then maybe you bring in the work, then maybe you review the work. I kind of wave at it as it goes by now. It's like I'm not really doing much technically, and so I'm missing out on some of the fun. But what I realized, it's funny going through these old notes. I was so technical in the beginning. I was always trying to find the best way to do all these different technical issues. That actually plays a very small role in solving someone's problem. I mean, obviously you have to have people with the technical smarts and the more they know and can bring the best techniques to bear. But the real problem is figuring out what the real problem is, the figuring out what the issues are. And you get so excited when you can finally map that to a technical technique and all. But not everybody has to master everything. And so, I choose a few things to stay current on. And other things, I have to say, I don't know a lot. And that's a little bit humbling, but you have to focus, I think, on what's most important to making an impact. And it's not going to have an impact if things aren't used. So you have to learn how to be trusted and how to have the technology be trusted and how to listen, how to solve the real problem, how to get early enough results that the project doesn't lose momentum or support. And, these are, and some people call them soft skills. These are very interpersonal skills and again, thinking it as if you're the other person and what could help them the most. A lot of times for us, it's technology transfer. We'll solve a problem and then we'll teach the client how we did it, and they really appreciate that. And they often bring us in the next time knowing that we'll be generous with our information.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so I've got the visual now of sort of the work flying past you and you waving to it as it goes by. Is there, I guess, sort of a two-part question. Is there ever a time when you feel an urge, like that project, that looks meaty, that I want to jump in that?
We had a situation where we had a lead. Somebody had read Eric Siegel's book, and I'm featured in chapter 1 of Eric's book because our big project with a hedge fund was a big success. And early on, even before the client invested, I got permission to invest in it, and my wife invested all of her savings in it. So this really impressed Eric, and he used it as an example. And somebody had read that book and then asked Eric to maybe help him. And he said, "Oh, well, I'm busy, but John Elder would be great." And the guy was like, "He's real? That's a real person?" So they got real excited about talking with me. And he had this small project, but it was right up my alley because it was looking at the significance of different combinations of things. And I'm really focused on the significance of results. I mean, if you think back to that drug discovery, hey, we've got this little bit of difference, how significant it is. Well, first of all, we showed them the difference was bigger, and then that the significance was really high. So all the statistics, kind of boils down to how likely could that have happened by chance, and that's your significance level. And the way this is typically done is not good. So we've got a new way of doing it, target shuffling, which I try to evangelize about all the time. But that really is the key question. And so here was a project that was small. It was too small for our commercial group to take on. So I said, I'd like to. So I got a little programming help, and we did it was one of those kinds of things where the thing that I was really interested on was exactly the technology that was needed for this problem. And so it was very satisfying and a success.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very exciting. And for folks who just got the tease of target shuffling, we'll put a link in the show notes wherever you're listening to this. You can click there, learn more about target shuffling, we'll have a link of John teaching you about target shuffling there.
Yeah.
John, I want to ask you one more question. Maybe this is sort of a lead in from the sort of ideal project that floated by that you got to jump on in sort of the magic world where you've got a client who says, "Oh, John Elder, he's real. I just want to pay John to do whatever work he finds interesting.
Do something fun.
Do something fun."
Wow. That, it's funny because I'm kind of in that situation. They pay me here and I'm not really sure if I'm worth it. Before the pandemic, I was jetting all over the world and teaching and more busy than ever. And then when that stopped, I was working from home for about a month, and my wife said, "Don't you have someplace you have to go?" Okay, I got it. I'll leave. So anyway, I'm sort of semi-retired now, so I do have a little bit of fun picking and choosing. I guess it was three things that I'm interested in working on right now. One is I wrote a dissertation. I created a global search algorithm for my PhD years and years ago, and I want to get that code out there. We used it for several projects early on at Elder Research, and but I want it to be available to other people, so would love to get that code out there. That's a small doable thing. Another thing is I love investment modeling, and I've had this great idea that I've done on my own for years and it's not even my original idea, but taking advantage of just a short version of it is you, instead of investing in an index, which is a great thing to do, you buy the stocks individually, and at the end of the year, you give away the ones that have gone up, taking advantage of the tax laws that allow you to no one to pay any tax if you give away a long-term appreciated asset. So if you've had it for over a year and it's gone up, say from $100 to $150, you give it away, you get a tax deduction of $150, the charity gets $150, and nobody pays the tax on that $50 gain. So it's a nice incentive to donate to 501c3 charities. On the flip side, if you lose money and you sell it and you realize that loss, up to $3,000 of losses can be counted against ordinary income, and the other losses get counted against other gains. So you can roll over those losses from year to year. So these losses are eventually going to help you. So you buy all these stocks, some go up, some go down. You sell these, you give away these, and you get all these tax benefits that make the effectiveness much better than just an index. So that's a cool thing. I'd love to kind of make a business out of that, or make it small, and that would help a lot of people. And then the thing that I love to talk about when I go to conferences and all is this ways of calculating significance. So the ways of telling how likely that chance could have produced a result as good as you. And this, you have to think about chance using your data science. Like, given this data science algorithm with all of its powerful search and combinatorial things that it's trying, if the data is random, some combination is going to come out ahead of all the others. And it's going to look pretty good compared to not a placebo. Basically what you're trying to do is create the placebo effect in modeling. So you take a system that has the original data and you do the best you can, get a score. Well, it'll be very, very daunting if you said, let me scramble the data. In this case, I shuffle the target variable. Let me change it so there's no relationship between the inputs and outputs. And I know there's no relationship. So anything I find on this second run is going to be spurious. And you get a distribution of that by shuffling it several different times. You get a distribution of the best finding that you can come from, and you compare your best finding to that. So you've got your best finding from the original data, and then you've got the best finding from all these manipulated versions of the data, and that tells you where in that distribution you are. It tells you the significance of the result. And this can calibrate your finding to a probability and can completely eliminate the problem of multiple comparisons, where somebody says, look, I rolled double six. Well, was that one roll or 100 rolls? And they cherry picked their best result. So anyway, that simple idea is not well understood, but it would probably solve at least half of the inadvertent fraud that's being done today in science. Because in science, somewhere between 65 and 85% of all papers published in journals with peer-reviewed good journals is false. In other words, it can't be replicated. And that this would cut that way down. Now, the problem, one of the huge problems with it is it would cut down on publishing. So everybody in academia that depends on publishing is not really happy with the idea. But if you're actually depending on finding a real result, it's something we should try to find a way to do.
Yeah, John, that's great. When you champion a new publication, you say, I'm going to publish only real results, then I'm in. I'm subscribing. Those are all very exciting, John. I absolutely hope that you find time and you get an opportunity to work on those. I'd love to follow them. If folks want to follow you, they can always check in elderresearch.com. I don't know if there's anything else that they can do to follow you or your work in particular.
No, I don't tweet or anything, so or I don't X or whatever it's called now, but, except once in a blue moon. But Elder at elderresearch.com is my email if somebody wants to contact me.
Okay, awesome. We'll put the links in the show notes. Our guest today has been Dr. John Elder. John, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Evan.